Hello students, welcome back to Daily Chronicles by Abhiram Iyer. So today let's discuss the most important topics from the various sources like Hindu, PIB and Indian Express. For today we have chosen topics are Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj as today is its death anniversary, and let's talk about NEP 2020 and let's talk about the earthquakes, purchasing managers index that is in short the PMI, and also about the fluorescence, heat waves, and let's lastly talk about the chased payload of Chandrayaan 3. Chase payload of Chandrayaan 3. Chalo, let's start. Now, the first article is about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Why? Because today we are celebrating the death anniversary of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. In this context, let's talk about him. See, his history is vast, so we can't talk in one video. So I'm basically focusing on the administrative part. If we see his administration, it is mostly central administration because he inspired from the Deccan. Okay, he inspired from the Deccan style of administration, and largely he was inspired by the Malik Ambar in Ahmednagar, and his having Ashtapradhans, that is council of 8 ministers under the king. So the 8 ministers will assist him, that is Ashtapradhan, and Peshwa is the Mukhi Pradhan, who is the head of the advisory council responsible for the governance. Now next, talking about the revenue administration. So basically, he abolished the Jagidari system and replaced the traditional Raitwari system. Okay? And also, there are like Mirsardars, who are Mirsardars? Basically, they are the owners of the hereditary lands. Okay, holders of hereditary land rights to ensure the fair governance. He used to do strict governance on these Mirsardars, and there is also land measurement system. He adopted the Kati system. Remember this is important. See, these terms are basically important, like Ashtapradhan, and he abolished the Jagidari system and replaced the Raitwari system, Mirsardars, and also Kati system. Kati is nothing but just something like scale. So Kati system is measuring land with a rod or Kati for accurate revenue assessment. Okay, now taxes, there are majorly 2 types of taxes associated with it. First is Chout taxes, and other is Sardeshmukhi. What is Chout? Basically, it is 1/4 of the tax, that is 25% has to be paid to the Maratha kingdom to protect from the non-Maratha territories. Okay, so a tax of 1/4 or 25% paid to the Marathas as safeguard against invasions from non-Maratha territories, and others is Sardeshmukhi. The Sardeshmukhi is an additional tax, like 10% of additional tax, which is collected from the non-Maratha kingdoms outside of the Shivaji's kingdom. Okay, let's see about the military administration. Basically, if we'll talk the key features of military administration, there is something called as Ganimi Kawa, which is a guerrilla warfare, same something like the hit and run. Okay, same something like the hit and run, where he used to give the rapid attacks, surprise attacks, and also swift retreats to weaken the enemy dynasties, and also fort-based defense strategy. Basically, he has constructed many forts, among them Raigad Fort, Pratapgarh Fort, Torna, and Sinagarh forts are important. And if we see the naval strength, he is considered as the father of Indian Navy. Okay, because as he is the first Indian ruler to establish the naval force. Okay, and he protected the Konkan coast from many invaders like Portuguese, Siddhis, Dutch, and British invasions. And the key naval bases here are Sindhudurg, Vijayadurg, and Kolba forts. Okay, this is all about the administration of the Shivaji Maharaj. This is just precise and concise way. Now, the next article is about NEP 2020, that is National Education Policy 2020. Now, why this is in news? Because Pradhan Mantri Modi has hailed NEP 2020 as India's intellectual resonance, paving the way for a self-reliant, globally competitive nation through education and also innovation. And see, National Education Policy is continuously in news. So let's have a brief thing about National Education Policy 2020. Now, this National Education Policy is the third time implementation. Before, there are 2 in the year 1968 and in the year 1986. In 1968, it was under Indira Gandhi period, and 1986 was under Rajiv Gandhi period. Okay. Now, what are the basic features of this? Basically, if we take the school education, universal access from pre-primary to grade 12th. Okay, universal access from pre-primary to grade 12th. And also, there is a new curriculum structure which is replacing 10+2, and it is replaced with 5+3+3+4 systems, that is foundational stage like 3 to 8 years, preparatory stage around 8 to 11 years, and the middle stage, that is 11 to 14 years, secondary stage 14 to 18 years. So 5+3+3+4 structure, that is the new curriculum which is replacing the 10+2 system. And if we see the mother tongue or regional language, so the medium of language should be till grade 5, it should be in mother tongue. Okay, or any regional language. Okay, now if we see, there is Prarak portal and also National Assessment Center and Prarak program for student evaluations, for giving the reviews of the students, and also special focus on disadvantaged groups via the gender inclusion funds and also special education zones. Now this is about the school education. If we talk about the higher education, in higher education the target has been like gross enrollment ratio should be 50% by the year 2035. So the gross enrollment ratio should be increased to 50% by the year 2035. And there is also something called the National Research Foundation to boost the innovation and research of the students, and credit transfer and academic flexibility via the National Credit Framework, that is NCRF, and also National Higher Education Qualification Framework. Okay, and also internationalization of Indian campuses, like establishment of Indian universities abroad and foreign campuses in India mutually. Okay, and further, NEP 2020 is also talking about the teachers qualification, teacher education also. So Nishta program, there's something called Nishta program, which is a capacity building for teachers and principals, and there should be mandatory 4-year integrated BEd degree that has to be done by teachers. Okay, and digital and vocational learning. So some schemes like PM eVidya, which is a digital education via the Diksha portal. So it is also offering the digital education via the Diksha platform. And also something like National Digital Educational Architect, which is a digital framework for the education. This is all related with the digital platforms, and also vocational training for 50% of the students by the year 2025. And also if we see the investment and infrastructure, almost 6% of GDP for the education. Currently it has been increasing in the coming budgets. And also there is an initiative called PM Shri Schools, where 14,500 schools will be transferred to PM Shri Schools. Okay, now next, let's see some of the important points. Okay, we saw it is replacing 10+2 structure with the 5+3+3+4 curriculum, and also multi-streaming, that is flexibility to choose the subjects across all the streams. And also there is a diluted board, like board exams will be conducted twice the year. Okay, and it is testing only the core competitiveness and could become modular and will be offered twice a year. Okay, multilingual, that is three language policy to continue with preference for local language and medium of instruction till 8th. Okay, till grade 5 it is the regional language or local languages or vernacular languages. And bagless days, there has to be basically 10 bagless days in a year. Okay, and next, coming to for colleges, satellite college test, where National Testing Agency will conduct common college entrance exam twice a year, and 4 years bachelor degree, we all know that. And no affiliation, that is over next 15 years colleges will be given graded autonomy to give degrees affiliation with universities to earn so with deemed university status. Okay, then fee cap. So basically it is telling to decrease the fee cap, fee structure. Okay, that's all. And the universities, like making abroad universities in India and also Indian universities in the abroad mutually. Now let's see some of the schemes related with the National Education Policy 2020. So basically PM Shri Schools, as we know, why? Because to improve the quality of education, inclusive education in 14,500 schools. basically government schools, and also Kendra Vidyalayas. Next is Nipun Bharat, which is the foundational literacy and numeracy by grade 3 by the year 2026 and 2027. This is promoting the foundational literacy and numeracy. Okay. Next is PM E-Vidya, something E, which is related to the digital, right? So online digital learning through platforms like Diksha platform. Next is Nishita, which is related to the teachers and principal training. This is all some brief introduction for the brief points to be noted for National Education Policy 2020. Now, the next article is earthquake. This will talk in perspective of mains perspective. The topic is like, how did the Myanmar earthquakes occur? So we'll be discussing about Sangay Fault and why is the plate boundary in Southeast Asia an active tectonic feature. Okay, but first let's see about the earthquakes. Now, what are earthquakes? Simply, earthquake is nothing but shaking of the earth. Why? So basically, it is a sudden shaking of the earth's surface due to release of energy from the earth's crust, right? So basically, it is release of energy from the earth's crust. Then how it is caused? By the plate movements, by the plate tectonics, movement of plate tectonics, volcanic activity, or human-induced factors also. Now there are 4 types of earthquakes. First is the tectonic earthquake, which is caused by the plate movements, which are most common earthquakes. The other thing is volcanic earthquakes, which is linked with the volcanic eruptions, and other thing is induced earthquakes, which is caused due to mining, dam reservoirs, etc., and also collapse earthquakes, which is caused due to underground mining. So these are the major types of earthquakes, and there are 3 types of faults. One is strike slip faults, which is horizontal movement. So the example is recently we saw the Myanmar earthquake, that is Sangay Fault, and there is normal faults, which is vertical movement. Example is Great Rift Valley, which is in Africa, which is caused in Africa, and there is also something called as reverse faults, that is also called as thrust faults, which is one plate pushed over the another. So basically, these plates pushes one over the other. Then this is called thrust faults. Okay, example is our Himalayan region, the earthquakes occurring in the Himalayan region. So this is the definition. These are the types of earthquakes, and these are the types of faults causing the earthquakes. Now coming, we have to know about the Sangay Fault, which is the reason for the Myanmar's earthquake. Okay, that is the Sangay Fault. Now basically, this is a strike slip fault, which is horizontal, which moves in horizontal, and the length is approximately 1400 kilometers from Andaman Sea to the eastern Himalayas. And if you see the seismic roll, it accommodates 50 to 55% of total plate motion in the region, and it generates frequent earthquakes, like almost magnitude of 7+, which is high magnitude, causing severe damages. Now comparison with the other major faults, basically San Andreas Fault, which is in USA, it is similar to the strike slip movement. And Himalayan thrust fault, we saw reverse faulting. It produces mega thrust earthquakes, which is in high magnitude in the Himalayan regions. Okay, this is all about the Sangay Fault, which caused the Myanmar's earthquakes. Now let's see, why is South Asia basically seismically active. Okay, South Asia means it also includes India, right? Okay, now if we see the plate tectonics, the Indian plates are moving constantly. So basically, the Indian plate is colliding with the Eurasian plate. Okay, Indian plate is colliding with the Eurasian plate at 5 centimeter per year. Now, this is resulting in the continuous stress accumulation and leading to the earthquakes. Now, in South Asia, there are mostly seismically active zones. That is, first thing is, we have to remember the Himalayan zones, right? Himalayan region in India, Nepal, Bhutan and Pakistan. So basically, it is caused due to the thrust faults of the earthquakes, right? Next, Indo-Burma region, Indo-Burman ranges like Myanmar and Southeast Asia. Next is Shillong Plateau, which is in Meghalaya and Assam, and also Andaman Nicobar subduction zones. Okay, these are the most seismically active zones in the South Asia part. One is Himalayan region, Indo-Burma region, Shillong Plateau, which is in Meghalaya and Assam, and also Andaman Nicobar subduction zones. Now, basically, in the mains perspective, let's see what are the lessons India has to learn from the recent Myanmar earthquakes. So, basically, we have to build the stricter building codes like earthquake resistant constructions, where implement IS, that is Indian Standards 1893 building codes, okay, for earthquake resistant design for all the buildings. Example, if we take Rashtrapati Bhavan in India, okay, so after 1993 Lador earthquake, Maharashtra introduced stricter construction rules, and also Rashtrapati Bhavan, which is in Delhi, is like earthquake proofed building, which is built by retrofitting techniques, okay. And next, we see the early warning systems. So we have to expand our India's earthquake warning systems, where this earthquake warning systems provides the alert sounds before any earthquake is occurring. Example, Uttarakhand implemented this, okay, and also satellite based monitoring. Examples, ISRO's GPS based seismic sensors help to detect the early warning of this earthquakes. It detects the fault moments in the real time, okay, GPS based seismic sensors. And also we have to make the community preparedness like giving education programs to the public, and also mock drills in public schools, especially in the school system itself. Okay, so the National Disaster Management Authority, that is NDMA, organizes drills in the metro cities. And also strengthening the disaster management, like giving more funds to the NDMA, that is National Disaster Management funds, and also NDRF. Okay, for example, if we see after this 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which caused the earthquake, tsunami was caused due to the earthquake. The National Disaster Response Force was expanded, okay, and also we need the better coordination between SDRF and NDRF, that is State Disaster Management Response, and also National Disaster Response Fund managements. Okay, so during 2015 Nepal earthquake, India's Operational Maitri deployed the NDRF teams for rescue efforts. That is, India have been assisted Nepal. Okay, and we also have to improve the research and development, like seismic micronization mapping, and also collaborating with the global seismology institutes. Okay, that's it. Now, talking about the Purchasing Managers Index, in short PMI. Now, why it is in news? Basically, factory output at 8 months high in March. Okay, what is this? What it is talking about? So basically, it is talking about manufacturing activity as measured by the seasonally adjusted PMI climbed to an 8-month high of 58.1 in March 2025. Okay, so basically the article is telling 58 after 8 months of time, this factory output has been increased. Okay, you can see the graph here from July to March 2025. July 2024 to March 2025, there is an increase of factory output. Okay, in this context, it is important to talk about PMI, that is Purchasing Managers Index. Now, what is this PMI? Basically, it is an economic indicator reflecting business activity in the manufacturing and service sectors. Okay, in the manufacturing and service sectors, and it is based on the surveys of purchasing managers across the various industries. Now, who releases this PMI? In India, it is released by the S&P Global, which was formerly IHS Markit, and in the global level, it is ISM releases in USA, and also S&P Global releases this Purchasing Managers Index. In India, it is released by the S&P Global, and this S&P Global was previously the IHS Markit. Now, there are basically 3 types of PMI indicators, that is manufacturing PMI, services PMI, composite PMI. As the names are telling, manufacturing, which tracks the factory output, new orders, employment and inventory levels. Services simply measures the business activity in the services sector like the banking, IT and hospitality. Composite PMI, like both manufacturing plus services. Basically, it is a combined index of both manufacturing and services PMI. Next, how do we calculate this PMI? So this PMI is based on a scale of 0 to 100, where above 50 means expansion, below 50 means contraction, that is decline in business activities, and exactly 50 there's no change. So above 50 expansion, that is growth in the business activities. And further, let's see the importance of PMI. What is the significance? to release this PMI data. Basically, early economic indicators. So PMI gives real-time insights into economic trends before the official GDP data, and also investment decision making. Like if it is contracting or it sees it is expanding, then you can invest. So investment decision making, where it is used by investors, businesses, and policymakers to access the market conditions, and also inflation trends. Raising PMI may indicate higher demand and inflationary pressures before giving this GDP data. And also monetary policy impact. So RBI considers this PMI trends while formulating the interest rate policies. Now, there's a difference between PMI data and GDP data basically. So this PMI is a leading indicator which predicts the economic trends, but whereas GDP is a lagging indicator which measures the past performance. But whereas this PMI is a leading indicator which is measuring economic trends. But GDP, this is a lagging indicator which measures the past performance. Okay, example, rising PMI suggests future GDP growth, while a declining PMI may signal to the economic slowdown. That's all. Now next talk about the fluorosis. Why it is in use? So basically excess fluoride in the Sonbhadra groundwater, residents say they are getting more sicker. In this context, it is important to know about fluorosis for the prelims perspective, for the exam perspective. Now what is fluorosis? Simply it is nothing but excess amount of fluoride in the water. So what is this fluoride contamination? It refers to the excess presence of fluoride in drinking water, soil, food, which is leading to health and environmental hazards. Now, what is the safe limit? Basically, it should be 1 milligram per liter. Okay. If it is exceeding more than 1 milligram per liter, then you can say it is fluorosis. Now, what is the excess fluorosis? Okay. Greater than 1.5 milligrams per liter, which is causing fluorosis and other health issues. Now let's see what are the causes of fluorosis, how this fluorosis is caused. Basically it is caused due to natural sources and anthropogenic sources. What are these natural sources? Geogenic sources from fluoride-rich rocks which dissolve in groundwater, and also due to volcanic activity and weathering of minerals like fluoride, and also anthropogenic sources, which will be caused from industrial waste from aluminium, fertilizers and glass industries, and also phosphate fertilizers in agriculture. That is why if we use excess phosphate fertilizers, it leads to fluorosis in that areas. And also burning of coal in thermal power plants. This residue will go to soil, will accumulate in soil and water and leads to fluorosis. Okay. Now, what are the health impacts? Dental fluorosis. You can see discoloration of your teeth, yellow or brown stains on the teeth, and skeletal fluorosis. Which this fluorosis, when it enters into the body, it weakens the bones and leads to joint pains and also deformities. Neurological issues like memory loss, fatigue, and also developmental disorders and endocrine disorders, like which is affecting the thyroid and kidney functions. Okay, these are the impacts of fluorosis. Now let's see what are the initiatives government has taken and what are the techniques. Basically, in Telangana, Nalgonda region is affected with the fluorosis. So Telangana has brought up the Nalgonda technique, which uses alum and lime. This is very cost effective. Okay. Now that fluoride water is mixed with the alum and lime, where it neutralizes. So that is the Nalgonda technique, which Nalgonda is in Telangana, obviously. Okay. Next is activated alumina filters and also reverse osmosis, and other is electrocoagulation, which is a new technology, recent technology, but it is in use. Now, what are the government initiatives? So basically, National Program for Prevention and Control of Fluorosis, and also Jal Jeevan Mission, which ensures safe drinking water supply, and also Atal Mission, that is Amrut basically. What is Amrut? Atal Mission for Regeneration and Urban Transformation, which focuses on water quality improvement. And we also should make community awareness. So public education on fluoride-free diet, and also you have to take the calcium-rich foods, and also encouraging low fluoride toothpaste usage. Basically, you remember that ad, right? Do you have? Now let's see the other sources of contamination of water. Fluoride, we saw the sources rocks, fertilizers, industry. It causes dental and skeletal fluorosis. And next is arsenic contamination in groundwater and also industrial. It is caused by the industrial waste, and it leads to cancer and skin lesions, and also lead from the pipes. lead pipes, paints, and batteries, it leads to brain damage and organ failure. And also nitrates, what causes this? Excess amount of fertilizers and sewage. What it causes? Blue baby syndrome. Excess amount of methanoglobin in the blood, and this leads to discoloration. Okay, and iron. How this iron contamination is caused? Due to soil and industrial discharge, which causes organ damage and also stains. Now, mercury is caused due to coal plants and mining. What it leads to? Nervous system damage. Okay. Now let's talk about the heat waves. As we saw, summer didn't come. This is a month of April. There is soaring temperatures, right? So take care as exam is approaching. Now, what is this heat wave? Basically, in the name itself, we can understand excess amount of heat. So abnormally high temperatures occurring in summer from month of March to June, sometimes July also, but July is monsoon season. Okay, now according to IMD, there has been a criteria to declare it as heat waves. In the plains, if we see the temperature should be exceeded 40 degrees centigrade, and hills more than or equal to 30 degrees centigrade, and in coastal areas greater than or less than 37 degrees centigrade. I repeat again, remember this. So basically, IMD has given criteria for declaring heat waves. That is, for plains, the temperature should be greater than or equal to 40 degrees centigrade, and in hills greater than or equal to 30 degrees centigrade, and in coastal areas greater than or less or equal to 37 degrees centigrade. Now, when the severe heat wave is declared, so temperature deviation above 6.5 degrees centigrade or actual temperature above 47 degrees of centigrade. Now, there has to be two consecutive days in two stations within a meteorological subdivision, then it is declared as the heat wave. Okay, next we'll talk about the color code. Basically, we know the impacts and effects also, so I'm not focusing on that. Let's see the color code. So green means it is a normal day, maximum temperatures. Yellow means be prepared, that is, it is giving an alert where heat wave conditions at isolated pockets persist on 2 days. Orange alert, same, be prepared. Sorry, yellow is be updated. Orange is be prepared, which is severe heat alert for 2 days, where severe heat conditions persist for 2 days, though not severe, but heat waves persist for 4 days or more. Now, red alert, as we know, take action, do not go out, take care of yourself. This is the extreme heat alert for the day. So basically for green, yellow, orange and red. Okay. Should I cover anything? That's it. Okay. Now, lastly, let's talk about the CHASTE, which is a payload of Chandrayaan-3. Now, why it is in news? Because Chandrayaan CHASTE takes the moon's temperature. Okay. So what is CHASTE? It is Chandra's surface thermophysical experiment. What is its purpose? It measures the temperature profile of the lunar topsoil at the moon's south pole to study the thermal behavior. I repeat you again, listen carefully. What is the purpose of this? Basically, it measures the surface temperature of the moon simply. Okay, measures temperature profile of the lunar topsoil at the moon's south pole to study the thermal behavior. Till the depth, it penetrates till the depth of 10 centimeters into the surface. And what are the sensors? They are equipped with some 10 temperature sensors. Okay, now who has done this development? It is developed by the ISRO. We all know that. So ISRO's Vikram Sarabhai Space Center in collaboration with the Physical Research Laboratory of Ahmedabad. Now next, let's talk about the key findings. What did it find? So it found that the surface temperature is approximately 40 to 50 degrees centigrade, and at 80 mm depth, it said that it drops to around minus 10 degrees centigrade. And also, what is the implication from this? So the lunar topsoil acts as a strong thermal insulator. Okay, if we see, the surface temperature is approximately 40 to 50 degrees centigrade, but at 8 millimeters of depth, it was found around minus 10 degrees centigrade. So the implication here is lunar topsoil acts as the strong thermal insulator. Now, what is the significance for this? So basically, it confirms the insulating properties of the lunar regolith and also supports the idea of using lunar soil for building human habitats, providing insulation against the extreme temperatures and harmful radiation. See, even we are not leaving the moon. It is supporting the idea of using lunar soil for building human activities. Okay, we are polluting on the earth, and now we want to move to the moon. Okay, now let's see the payloads, other payloads associated with the Chandrayaan-3. If we see Vikram lander, so these four, that is CHASTE, and also LISA, that is instrument for lunar seismic activity, which is detecting the seismic activity on the moon. Okay, and also RAMBA. RAMBA here stands for Radio Autonomy of Moon-Bound Hypersensitive Ionosphere and Atmosphere. What is the significance of this RAMBA? Basically, it studies the lunar ionosphere and also plasma density variations. And the thing is Laser Retroreflector Array, LRA. What is the significance of this? Basically, it helps to measure the moon's position accurately. And also, if we see the rover, two things, that is alpha particle X-ray spectrometer. Here as it is telling alpha particle, that means it is analyzing the elemental composition of lunar rocks, lunar soil, and also above the rocks. And the other is laser induced breakdown spectroscope, that is which is determining the chemical composition of lunar surface materials. Both are same, but here it is the alpha particle X-ray spectrometer is analyzing the elemental composition of lunar soil and rocks, but whereas laser induced breakdown spectroscope is determining the chemical composition of lunar surface materials. And coming to the propulsion module, that is SHAPE here stands for Spectropolarimeter of Habitable Planet Earth. It sees the comparison, like how is the habitable, it does a comparison basically, moon habitable versus earth conditions, moon conditions versus earth conditions. So basically it studies the earth spectral and polarimetric measurements for exoplanet research. These are the payloads associated with the Chandrayaan-3. Okay, for today that's all. Thank you.